Hey everybody, this is Perch, and we've got a suggestion here on gimmicks. And before I get into it, one way of thinking about some of this stuff, I mean, a lot of us, I have conversations, I go on streams on other channels, and a lot of us have the same kind of general point of view that variants are bad, gimmicks are bad, and that these aren't wonderful. And from a pure comic reading standpoint, that's true. Variant covers, if you're an art collector, if you don't really care about what goes on inside the cover, then they could be fine. You're collecting art at that point, and it can be fun. And yeah, what's the deal? But if you care about stories, and I find that most of the conversations I have are about the stories, the plot, the character development, those kinds of things. Yeah, gimmicks and variants are an annoyance. But what if there was a different way of looking at it? And that was that the variants and the gimmicks, less the variants, but gimmicks anyway, brought money and attention and value. And very clever publishers took advantage of that increased money and market share and value and flipped it to basically, have have better contracts for people, have longer running comics and stories. I mean, I'll tell you right now that if Marvel came out and said, yeah, you keep bitching about variants, okay, but if we do 5 variants per comic, right? 5 variants per comic, then we'll guarantee that every single comic that uses 5 variants will go to issue 50. All of them. We'll say right now we'll green light them to issue 50. I'm like, okay, bring it on. Done. I'll take the variants in response to to some commitment, to some longevity. And if that's what it takes to get the business model going, then okay, I'll hold my nose and go for it because it's worth that price to get better stories. Another way to look at it is say, hey, we're going to do variants for prestige artists. We're going to mark those up and everything else, but the generic vanilla version of the cover A, we're going to sell that comic for $2 less. It's going to come in at $2.99. That's going to be our line, and then the variants we're going to charge $10 for. But that's going to be our new business model: is cheaper cover, cheaper opt-in issue, and then specialized covers to make up the margin. Okay, I'm interested in that too. Really, I'm interested in all these ideas. Like let's have it. Come on. But anyway, so here's a viewer message here, their idea for a gimmick. It says, "Hey Perch, I have an idea. I want to hear your take. It's an idea for diversifying comics. The big two should start a small line of square-bound original graphic novels based on their cinematic universes with guest writers. Yes, this is absolutely a gimmick sales strategy, but hear me out. Get those occasional quarterly, let's say, square-bound paperback original graphic novels, sell them everywhere, on Amazon bookshops, bookstores, comic shops, a Disney store. Basically sell them like books instead of comics. Let's get a Batman vs. Superman prequel graphic novel written by Zack Snyder. Okay, for example, I think these would sell great. I think plenty of directors and screenwriters would be down for it. They would be a one-shot graphic novel, say 120 pages. You don't have a book 1, book 2, or book 3 like a prestige miniseries. Rather, these would be self-contained stories, sell them for $9.99. I wonder if they could compete with manga. I think they'd certainly do a better job than YA graphic novels. I'm just spitballing here, but I think both publishers should have some work based on the cinematic universes that doesn't interfere with the main line of comics. And frankly, they should do a better job of more original graphic novels priced to compete with manga and available as manga too." Okay. It's an interesting idea. So here's the problem. I'll list out the problems with this before getting into kind of the good parts about it. So the first obvious problem is, would Zack Snyder want to write an original graphic novel? Probably not, is the challenge. I think, or would basically demand money in excess of what the comic book would pay or what the publisher would pay for it. I think a lot of the screenwriters, some of these names you're thinking about, they would go, well, if my time is worth X amount of dollars for the movie, which is a pretty high price tag, why would I spend the same time and get paid a tenth of what I get paid for movies? It's not worth it to me. Now you'd have some true believers that think like a Joss Whedon, and there's nothing wrong with. He doesn't have any controversy swirling around him or anything, so he could come in and do it. But I mean, a couple people are lovers of comics, are true believers of comics themselves, and so you would see some of those people like do it because it's just cool. But they would, even those people would demand that the publishers fork over a decent amount of money in order to do it. So I think that's problem. That's the biggest problem. The second is that it would take a level of pretty high orchestration in order to pull it off. So, to your point, you want to sell these in bookshops. You want to sell them in Amazon, in Walmart, Target, maybe Disney Store, everywhere. Sell them as books. The key here is that you'd have to basically format them like books, so there's no friction when you're putting them on the shelves, and you'd want to connect them back into comics. You're creating a new product. It's a graphic novel, as you say, but it's a different kind of graphic novel. It's a comic book disguised as a book, which you might say is a graphic novel, but it's a kind of a different thing. You could go the full Tankobon route and try and go in as manga, but manga isn't doing it exactly this way. So think about it this way: a bookstore would hold this thing in their hands and go, "Where do I put this? Do I put this with the graphic novels, with the manga, with the movie adaptations, with fiction? Like, I'm not sure what to do with this book." And unfortunately, the last kind of big problem is everything that's been a movie adaptation, outside of comics, even books and posters and merchandise, typically does very poorly. Unless it's a T-shirt or a toy or that kind of thing. But a lot of the book type things, the official movie tie-ins, that kind of stuff, they tend to be very poor sellers. To the point that in some cases, Penguin Random House, other companies have kind of forced bookstores to take them as incentive programs for other things. People just don't. People are like, I'm going to watch the movie. I don't need to read a book about it. So here, what you'd have to do is say, well, good news, you don't have to read a book. It's still a comic book, but it's very much, themed and in line with, the movie itself and the experience you get, all including the director or somebody involved. So those are pretty big obstacles to make this work. But if you had an answer for it, if you could tackle it, it would be pretty valuable. So here's the good part about what you're suggesting, or here's how, if it was done right, why it would be so successful. It would be effectively the bridge between the comic book and the media that a lot of people are searching for. They definitely want this to happen. They just don't know how to accomplish it, and it's been a pretty profound struggle, to get there. So they would love to make this connection. I mean, in many ways, if you think about kind of the triple play of merchandise, book media, entertainment media, if you've got the magic sauce to bring those together and hand them to a company, it's extremely valuable. Disney definitely desires it. They have kind of the fourth leg of that stool is, being able to basically merchandise it inside the parks with real life experiences and other things. So that's also what they're pushing for. Universal has done that pretty effectively with Harry Potter Land. I mean, Universal Studios over in Florida, and to some extent in California, it was definitely seen as the secondary park by a mile, and they were struggling to figure out how they could capture audiences. I mean, people would go to those locations and they'd say, I'm going to spend 5 days at Disney and I'll spend a day at Universal. That was kind of the mentality. But Harry Potter turned that around for them. I mean, it became a competitive destination because of the strength of Potter. Now, Potter is starting to lose some steam and everything else, but those worlds still they absolutely bring guests to the park, and it's a major deal. So if you can start to create environments where all these things benefit off each other, it's money. It's definitely in their best interest to figure it out. One of the ways you could do it is you go and you have whatever, and this would not work as well with how Warner is doing it, but it would work with how Disney is doing it for their cinematic universe, because Disney does put their contracts, and when they make their movies, they do require more out of the actors and out of the performers and out of the director. They require additional things because they're searching for this, triple play of sorts. So you could see a world where basically they are, they're able to say, hey, we're hiring you to do this movie, and not just the director, but the actors as well. So one of the things we want you to do is make a short story. It's going to be printed as a comic, and then we're going to put your name on it. Maybe that gets farmed out to some intern. I mean, who knows? But basically, we're going to do other things. We're going to bake books and comics into the equation. We're going to create this square bound, book that's going to go on the shelf. We're going to sell it to the mass market, not just comic book shops, but big box stores, Target and Barnes and Noble and Walmart and everywhere we could do it. And you're going to put your name on it. You're going to participate in it. Maybe the actor, if it's the new Thor movie coming up, then hey, Hemsworth is going to have to come in and he's going to write a short story for this, and we're going to tie it. It's definitely in the cinematic universe. The one thing I like a lot of parts of your idea, but one really strong aspect to it is just, for lack of a better word, submit. And when I say submit, I mean just go all in on the cinematic universe. Just commit and say, we're going to embrace it, but leave it separate from the comic universe. Don't try and tie it in. Don't try and half-ass transform the comic universe to vaguely look like the movie universe. Just come out and say, here's the product we've got. It's a separate line, like the Ultimate Universe was for Marvel for a period of time. We're bringing in people who are, deeply embedded inside the cinematic universe to play in that. We're going to sell it to a different channel. We're not going to, focus on the comic book shops. That's a good idea. And that probably makes everyone feel good because it leaves the historical collectors alone. They get to continue to kind of live in their own universe. You give something that is very movie based, but you don't try and compete in a comic shop. You take it to Target and you say, here's a product for Target that's a comic book. But you do get very smart with the marketing and the messaging and whoever's putting your book together and putting the extra material to say, hey, if you like this, go deeper. And that would even be kind of the tagline that you use, explore this world. Go, if for the 1 in 10 people that read this and want more, a lot more, say, and here's the easy way to, talk about it. That when Star Wars has flirted with this, Marvel's flirted with the idea of the expanded universe is such a great tagline. It's a good marketing concept. It makes sense to people. This is an expanded universe. You have the regular universe, and then you want expansion. You want more. Well, the more can be the regular comic land, and this gives you a good pipeline to divert people into it. And I think that would be incredibly smart to do. And I think a good structured way to do it would make everybody a lot of money. But anyway, good message, good conversation. And for those of you who are listening, what are the kinds of things that make sense from this standpoint? What are gimmicks that are good? Maybe we're all fighting gimmicks too much, and if we embraced them a little bit, it would make our life better. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.